Create enriching experiences beyond the classroom through ACSI Student Leadership and Learning with Emily Pigott.
Well, hello and welcome to the Student Leadership and Learning broadcast, where we journey together to impact, influence, and equip today's students to lead with intentionality and purpose. Well, I'm your host, Emily Pigott, and as always, it's an honor to spend time with you as we explore today's topic, creativity and leadership, thinking beyond the box. So if leadership is about influence, and it is, and of course it's about service above all things, then creativity, that's the secret sauce that makes that influence powerful, relevant, and transformative. So if we think about the greatest leaders in history, of course, Jesus is the one that comes to mind. Maybe the Apostle Paul, Nehemiah, Deborah, thinking through leadership examples. They didn't just lead with cookie cutter methods. They adapted, they innovated, and they responded to challenges with fresh perspectives. They didn't just think about the way that it's always been and doing the same thing as we've always done it. The same is true of our students today. Our student leaders need to develop creative thinking to navigate an ever-changing world. And in a world where they don't have to do as much thinking as they've had in the past, because we have all of the innovation in front of us with the AI development. And all of those are great things if we help our students shepherd them well. So let's think about some other leaders in history. People like Martin Luther King Jr., who creatively led the civil rights movement with peaceful resistance and a powerful rhetoric. Or perhaps Thomas Edison. I'm from Florida, so he's a pretty big deal in our area. He saw failure as part of the innovation process. I love that about him. And he revolutionized the way that we use electricity. Or maybe let's think about Harriet Tubman, who courageously innovated secret escape routes to lead slaves to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Or perhaps, hey, let's talk about Winston Churchill, who inspired a nation during World War II with his unyielding spirit and strategic use of rhetoric, guiding Britain through one of the darkest hours with courage and determination. Well, in the Bible, we see leaders like Joseph, who used strategic thinking and creativity to prepare Egypt for a famine. And then, of course, there's Esther, who navigated the politics in the palace with wisdom and courage. Why? To save her people. And let's think about William Carey, known as the father of modern missions, who brought the gospel to India by creatively using education, printing, and linguistics to translate the Bible into multiple language. And he opened the doors for countless people to hear God's word. See, none of these leaders used cookie cutter methods. All of these leaders used creativity and innovative thinking. They adapted, innovated, and responded to challenges with fresh perspectives. The same is true today. Our student leaders need to develop creative thinking to navigate this ever-changing world. Well, in Genesis 1:1, we read, "In the beginning, God created." See, creativity is part of God's nature, and we are made in his image. So creativity is a divine gift, and it's meant to be used in leadership for problem solving and inspiring others. And when we think of leadership, we often focus on authority or strategy or perhaps even decision making, but God frequently calls leaders to think differently. Isaiah 43:19 says, "See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" You see, God celebrates innovation. So let's talk about some real world leaders who embodied creativity. We've talked about some. Let's talk about a few more. George Washington Carver. Now, he was born into slavery, and he became a scientist and an educator who transformed agriculture in the U.S. He didn't just teach, he reimagined how farmers could use peanuts, sweet potatoes, and crop rotation to restore the depleted soil. That is creative thinking. He saw a problem and he went about finding a solution for that problem. He didn't wait for the solution. He created it. That's the mindset that we want to instill in our students. And as Christian educators, sometimes we need to ask ourselves the question, how do we create those environments where students feel safe to think outside the box? They aren't concerned about getting it wrong or providing the wrong answer. We create that environment that invites creativity in. Well, it all starts with how we model creativity in our own leadership, in our own classroom, in our own school as a school leader. And it starts with giving them space to practice that creativity. For this generation, they don't need to be taught creativity as much as they need the space to exercise their creative muscles. Well, let's take a look at an example in scripture from our good friend Nehemiah. Nehemiah was an incredible innovator. He's best known for his work on the wall, but when he set out to rebuild those walls, he faced, we know this, opposition, limited resources, and internal conflict. It was a tough job that had less to do about the manual labor and more to do about navigating the opposition that rose up around it. But he didn't crumble. Instead, he got creative. He assigned families to sections of the wall near their homes. He turned the personal investment that they would have to protect and rebuild that wall near their homes into motivation. That's creativity. He instructed workers to carry tools in one hand and weapons in the other, adapting to the situation at hand. This is leadership thinking, seeing problems and designing innovative solutions. So think about this in a real world challenge. Many of our schools have student government, and the most common complaint that I hear from student government is we can't get our student body involved. For whatever reason, they cast these big visions and they struggle getting their classmates on board. Well, recently I was talking with a school and their student government about this very problem. And what they did is, so instead of sending out another email or calling another class meeting, they did a pop-up event out of nowhere. And they said, hey, this is what's happening this time. Come be a part of it. They had an interactive brainstorming session. They came up with this neat idea and it was spur of the moment. It was creative. Students love it. Their engagement went through the roof. See, creativity and leadership, it means refusing to settle for the way it's always been. In other words, we can't let our students get stuck in the fact that, well, nobody wants to be involved. No, let's push them to think beyond them. Let's push them to think that there is a solution to the apathy problem that they have in among their classmates. So another opportunity or an incredible brainstorming option to engage your students could be reverse brainstorming. I love to get students' attention, to capture their attention. And one of the ways to do this is with a reverse brainstorming exercise. So instead of asking, how do we solve this problem? Shock them and say, how can we make this problem worse? What could we do as a class or student government to make this problem worse? They will not know what to do with that, but you'll see they will begin to list ideas of ways that things could get worse. And then all of a sudden, they're going to flip that script all on their own because they're going to see, oh, wait, these are all the ways that it can go wrong. Now let's come up with all the ways that it can go right. It's a super fun activity, and it will help make some meetings even more dynamic when you reverse that script. Now, we know Jesus. He was the master creative thinker, and he constantly broke expectations. I love the story when he asked about taxes. He used a coin and said, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is due to God." When teaching about the kingdom, he didn't lecture it. He told parables. In other words, he told stories. Stories resonate with our students today. When healing, he didn't use one method. Often, he used varying types of methods. Go dip in the Jordan 7 times. Things that made you go, really? Why should I have to do this? Because I know that you could heal me on the spot. But he wanted to show us that leadership isn't about rigid formulas. No, Jesus demonstrated for us that leadership is about creative problem solving. So I worked with a group of students, this was a few years back, that wanted to increase community service involvement. They could not get their classmates to be involved. So instead of just saying, hey, join us here and this is what we're going to do, they came up with a creative solution. See, our students, they're so creative. We think we have to solve the problems for them. Actually, we don't. We just need to give them the space to solve it. But they created a service scavenger hunt. So instead of just announcing the project, they created an interactive challenge where teams competed to complete different service projects. Participation skyrocketed. Why? Everybody loves a good competition, at least for the most part. What about a classroom challenge? So a creative leadership scenario in the classroom. Maybe give students leadership dilemmas. For example, your school wants to increase kindness or service, or you fill in the blank. What's an out-of-the-box way to make that happen? And then have them pitch their ideas in a Shark Tank style format. Why not have them get up there and come up with the most compelling reasons why their ideas are the ones that will increase engagement in whatever area you've deemed. You watch the participation, it will skyrocket. Now, let's think about, we've talked a little bit when we first started about innovative leaders in Christian history. So I want to, as we begin to wrap up our time together, I want to spend a little time talking about those. How about Deborah? So I mentioned her earlier. She had a very creative strategy in leadership. We know her as a judge, but she was a strategist. She didn't have the biggest army, we know that, but she had wisdom and she had God's guidance. She commanded Barak to go into battle, but knew victory required more than muscle. There's a leadership lesson in that right there. Leadership and winning battles will require much more than muscle. It needed faith and creativity, and that is definitely still true today. See, this teaches students that leadership is about using every resource we have wisely, including the God-given intellect. William Wilberforce, he was a creative advocate. He fought to end slavery in England, but he didn't just shout demands. He didn't just say, this is wrong and here is why. People don't resonate with that, but here's what he used: strategic storytelling, pamphlet writing, and information dissemination. He engaged artists to paint the horrors of slavery so that people could have a mental image of exactly what it is. And he even used the power of theater to sway public opinion. That's creativity and leadership. That's creativity and messaging. He shaped a culture for change. Imagine if we taught our students to approach their problems with that same level of ingenuity. Well, we know that creativity is a God-given leadership tool. Biblical and historical leaders who have changed the world have done so by thinking differently, by thinking creatively, by thinking outside the box. And we have to foster this same level of creativity in our students to prepare them for the real world challenges that they're going to face. So my challenge for you this week, try or think of, I know we're going into summer, so maybe you just journal and write it down, but try one creative leadership exercise with your students. Maybe it's the reverse brainstorming idea. Maybe it's a creative scenario challenge, or maybe it's rethinking a leadership dilemma. Help them have the opportunity to step outside the box. See, creativity, it isn't optional in leadership. It's essential. So let's challenge ourselves and our students to think differently, lead boldly, and solve problems with faith-driven innovation. Well, thanks for joining me today on the Student Leadership and Learning podcast. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with a fellow educator or school leader. And don't forget to subscribe for more practical tips and biblical insights on leadership. And until next time, remember, great leaders don't just follow trends, they create them. Let's keep leading by example and inspiring others to do the same. What you do matters every moment, every day, and our students are worth it because you are their difference maker. We'll see you next time.
Student Leadership and Learning is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Create enriching experiences beyond the classroom by visiting acsi.org/studentleadership.